Joining us now, NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, Bloomberg White House correspondent Akayla Gardner, former Democratic Congresswoman and MSNBC political analyst Donna Edwards, and former RNC Executive Committee member and co-founder of the Lincoln Project, Jennifer Horn. Good day to all four of you. Gabe, starting with you, the White House, as we were just mentioning, now clarifying details about President Biden's medical care. What do we know?
Hi there, Richard. Well, yes, there were some confusing statements earlier this week from the White House about whether President Biden had undergone a medical exam this week. Post-debate yesterday, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said that the president had not undergone a medical exam since February. But last night, during a meeting with Democratic governors, according to two sources familiar with the exchange, President Biden told the governors that, yes, he had been checked out by a doctor and that he was recovering well. Well, this morning, the White House does confirm that the president has been seen by a doctor for regular check-ins since the debate. And for context, Richard, the president does travel with his personal physician, and it's not uncommon, for that physician to be on hand in case there's a need. That's typical of any administration. So again, the White House confirming this morning that he has been checked by a doctor since the debate and that he's recovering well. But you mentioned those interviews. He did two interviews taped yesterday. They're airing this morning, and President Biden is now making the case that he can do the job.
I'm proud to be running for re-election as president who has made his promises and kept them. The guy I'm running against is a convicted felon who has said he wants to be a dictator on day one.
Now you see in that interview, Richard, the president really trying to pivot from the message of having to defend, his age and mental acuity, really trying to pivot to that message, that election message, taking on former President Trump. Richard?
Hey, Gabe, as we were mentioning, the pressure cooker continues post-debate. What are the plans in the coming days to push off some of that criticism and right the boat, if you will?
Well, Richard, the campaign really believes that President Biden is the best messenger for that, the best person to defend himself, and that's why they're trying to get him in front of as many eyeballs as possible in the coming days. Of course, his critics wonder why he hadn't done that sooner, and some congressional Democrats on the Hill wanted him to be out there sooner. But as you said, tomorrow he heads to Battleground, Wisconsin. He's sitting down with that interview with ABC News that will air tomorrow night in prime time. And then over the weekend on Sunday, he heads to Battleground, Pennsylvania. Then next week, at the NATO summit here in D.C., the White House says he will participate in a press conference. A lot of people will be watching him over the next coming days as pressure mounts on him to step aside. Richard?
And you will be watching along with Akayla. Akayla, how has the crisis management gone? As we were mentioning, we're a week post the debate. Who's in this crisis management team? Are they doing a good job? How do they feel? What are you hearing?
Yeah, the campaign has really tried to get out ahead of polling that we're now seeing that does show that Biden looks to be under pressure and is performing worse than he was before. That is something that they tried to downplay and say that the race hadn't really shaken up. That is proving to not be the case. And that is exactly what is concerning lawmakers. I'm hearing the consensus is really they want to beat Donald Trump, and they're questioning whether Biden is the person to do that. We're now seeing multiple House Democrats and former officials calling for Biden to step aside or to float whether there could be other options. And I think the key remarks that I saw was from Jim Clyburn, who is a co-chair on the campaign, who said that he would be open to sort of a mini primary where people could gun for delegates and that virtual roll call that we're expecting later this month. I thought that was a very interesting comment, particularly because he is an ally of Biden and someone who's very close to him.
Donna, where are we in this arc, you think? We've just had a barrage of polls, right, that came out earlier this week showing a larger gap. But we're talking about low single digits in terms of a pre and post debate difference here. Where are they? At the bottom right now? Are they at recovery? What's your perspective?
Well, I think certainly the president has a lot of ground to make up. He did that, in some part with the governors that he met with just yesterday. I thought that was a really important meeting. Those governors came out expressing full support for the president after having spent a good deal of time with him. I think that there's far more support on Capitol Hill than is being reported. I mean, I'm talking to lawmakers who really are squarely behind Joe Biden. And so I think that the president has the ability, especially over these next 5 days before Congress comes back into session and lawmakers are in town, to make up a lot of ground, doing public events, staying in front of the public. The best way that he can refute the concerns that people have expressed is to be out there and to be engaging and to be unscripted. And I think these next several days, and certainly next week with the NATO summit, provide a real opportunity for the president to tamp this conversation down.
You know, we played a little bit earlier here, Jennifer, of the Republican nominee really beating his chest based on the polls and post-debate evaluation of their performances. What is the best way for the Republican nominee to take advantage of today's situation based on the president being on his heels, Joe Biden, the candidate Joe Biden being on his heels right now?
Well, I don't want to sit here and give advice to the Republican nominee on how to do better on anything. You know, Trump's response has been very Trumpian, very much what you expected. It's been dishonest. You know, it's been he's telling lies. It's been distasteful in the way that he has expressed himself. But I think if we're going to have an honest conversation about, you know, what happened at the debate and how President Biden goes forward from here, then we have to have an honest conversation about Donald Trump as well. And I think it's a big mistake to treat Trump like he's just any other candidate running against a sitting president. He's a convicted felon. He's an adjudicated rapist. He has been very clear. If people should go back and reread the Time magazine article, you know, the imperial president, in his own words, about exactly how dangerous another Trump presidency will be. And when the Democrats and other voters are looking at what Joe Biden should do moving forward, they should be thinking very seriously about what it's going to look like if Donald Trump wins this race and who is going to be best positioned. It is naive to believe that you can just switch candidates midstream and everything will be right again. I am strongly a believer that they need to give Joe Biden this next week to show what he can do, to show where he is, to show that he can correct, and then start looking at polls and then start making your public comments.
Gabe, back to you. These polls that we're talking about, has the White House responded to the negative turn that has happened in 2 or 3 of the polls for the president as a candidate?
Well, look, the White House directly is very careful to comment on polling because that has to do with the election, and they bring up Hatch Act violations. But the campaign has really tried to get out in front of these polls. Yes, the New York Times Siena College poll that came out yesterday, as well as the Wall Street Journal poll that you just referenced. What the campaign really has been trying to do is to try and blunt that criticism by saying, look, internal polling still shows a tight race, that there really hasn't been that much movement post-debate according to that internal polling. And they were really trying to not just send that message to voters, to congressional Democrats, but also to their own staff. They really tried to hit that message hard in a campaign call yesterday that President Biden and Vice President Harris were on. But they're basically saying, look, nothing to see here yet. It's very soon after this debate. We really don't know. And, you know, all this criticism is baked in. Voters knew that Joe Biden was 81 years old, and they argue that the debate really hasn't changed the minds of many voters just yet. So they're downplaying the polls at this point. We'll have to see in the coming weeks just how much the polls shift after these public appearances over the next few days.
Kayla, quickly to you. You heard the 1 week from Jennifer. Is your sense from the White House, from the campaign, that they also feel that it's 1 week?
I think they know that the next couple days are crucial, but I think the fallout in general from this debate has really highlighted that the enthusiasm for Biden was not there. We talk a lot about double haters, but the enthusiasm problem for Biden is much deeper and much more acute, and he really still has problems with a lot of constituency groups, Black voters, young voters, particularly people concerned about the war in Gaza. And so they're still going to have to make up for that. And I think this debate really revealed that they still have people who are not confident in the president and who are frankly always concerned about the president's age. And the fact of the matter is he's not going to get any younger. He's going to be 86 at a second term. And voters are thinking about that a lot more as they're heading to the ballot box in November.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, Kayla Gardner, Donna Edwards, Jennifer Horn, thank you all four.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more, September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.